Good afternoon. On behalf of Green River College, I want to welcome all of you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Suzanne Johnson, and I currently have the honor of serving as president at this wonderful institution. I was asked to share a few opening words and to not be long so we can get on with the actual program. So I hope to do honor of that request. Over the past few days, I've been reading a lot about President Lindbloom, or Dr. Lindbloom, or Mel, or Dad, as many of you knew him. And it strikes me that if he were able to hear today, and I want to assume he is listening, that he would look down at all of us with great pride in terms of what this college became, what it is, and what it's becoming. As I've thought over the past few days about what would be appropriate to say about the founding president of this institution, an individual that established this college in 1964 and served until 1980, a person who was involved in establishing one of the strongest career and community and technical college systems we have in our country, where Green River became one of 34. I've wondered what he would say and think about this institution. And the word legacy came to mind. There are many ways you can measure legacy of someone's life. Of course, we're sitting in the Mel Lindbloom Student Union. That's one measure of legacy. We can think about legacy in the context of what he built at this institution, the amazing, vibrant college that it is, his legacy in contributing to the construction of a community and technical college system for Washington State. But what I think he probably would admire most, and I'll ask his family later, is what I consider to be one of the most important measures of legacy. And that's what you leave in people. What was Mel's legacy? What did he leave in people? From all that I've come to know about him, this was an individual who knew that education was the pathway to everyone's future. He believed in education and the role that education plays in furthering an individual's life and their families. I believe he knew that education changes lives and people change the world. Mel Lindbloom has legacy in tens of thousands of students that have come through the doors of Green River College and have gone out into the world and beyond this community to do amazing things in their life. Their lives were transformed by education. He believed in education. And what he began in 1964 has become one of the leading community colleges in this country, a community college that just not even 2 weeks ago, I can't imagine that, where I stand right now was the President of the United States. A President of the United States who knew that Green River College symbolizes all of what is important in terms of higher education today in our lives and in our country. That's legacy. That's legacy. And as Mel listens to us all today, what he knows to be true is this college has kept its heart and its soul as being a community college, true and true, providing career and technical education, associate's degrees, and opportunities to transfer on to other institutions across the country and outside of this country, in fact. But we have also become an institution that offers now nine bachelor degrees. And our most recent, which I'm so proud to be able to announce here, because I think some of you probably don't know yet, but we have now received our final approval to offer our LPN to BSN nursing degree starting this fall. Another measure of a legacy of Mel, and that is our 9th one. I don't know whether I could remember all the other 8 right now, so that won't be a quiz, but nursing is our now 9th 4-year degree here at Green River College. So when I think about Mel, I think about legacy. I think about how proud he must be in all of you and all of us and all that will come after us in instilling education that transforms people's lives and that will go out and change the world. I want to thank President Lindbloom's family for allowing us the honor of honoring him today. Honoring him allows us to honor ourselves. And with that, I'm going to hand over the program and be done with my opening remarks. So I hope I fit within my time span. Thank you, everyone.
Higher education in America really was only for relatively few. The end of World War II brought advancement, and the war babies were just beginning to grow old enough to be in high school and facing college education, and all of the colleges and universities were expanding very rapidly.
When the Community College Act was passed in 1967, it created the community college system. Up until that time, we had junior colleges that were essentially the first 2 years of academic transfer. We were fortunate to get in on the ground floor, and that's the way Green River was built, around a comprehensive college.
I knew Mel, of course, very well, and he was an early enthusiast. There wasn't anything that couldn't be done. A lot of changes had to occur and a lot of invention of new ways of doing things, and he was up to every one of those.
My name is Rich Rutkowski. I was the Vice President for Business Affairs under Mel Lindbloom, and I am delighted to be a part of this celebration of life for a great man. As I have thought about Mel Lindbloom, I have thought of the word best. And I can say this, Mel was really the very best. He was the best supervisor anybody could have. He hired me. He was the founding president of Green River and hired me in 1973 or thereabouts. And as I say supervisor, that really wasn't a proper term, because he let me administer the departments such as finance and as facilities, just the way that I needed to, and would give me help when I needed it. And so it really wasn't a supervisor. Mel was more like a colleague. Of course, he was a builder. He built this college. He built the buildings, he located them, he hired the first architect, Bud Elle, and they sited the buildings. They kept this college as natural as possible. He hired all of the faculty. He hired the staff from the very beginning. At any rate, I cherished him. He was the best colleague anyone could have, as well as a builder. Mel was also a tremendous statesman. As a colleague, he would take me to the meetings of presidents. We'd go to Olympia and we would talk the big issues of building a community college system. And he treated me just as a colleague. But he was also a tremendous statesman. Here was a group of community college presidents, and oh, was I ever impressed. But they talked about the important things of building a system, building individual colleges. And as a statesman, Mel was always thinking of the better good of the system. It was not so competitive back then, but rather very collaborative. Another best that I think about Mel is his advocacy. What an advocate he was for the faculty and for the staff of Green River. He was down there in Olympia, always talking with the politicians, convincing them that a salary raise was needed or a better benefit package. At any rate, not everybody agreed with that, his advocacy, but I can tell you from somebody who worked next to him and was very close to him, I knew very, very well that he was a tremendous advocate on behalf of everybody associated with Green River. And then, on one trip to Olympia, we stopped by his house to pick up some paperwork, and I saw that the nearby house was for sale. And so I put in my offer, and fortunately it got accepted, and I became Mel's neighbor. He was the best neighbor ever. There was a vacant lot between us, and how we would spend some time talking about that political situation, talking about the college, talking about the goals that he had. We spent some very quality time as we had our weed whackers and were clearing the weeds out of that old lot right there between our houses. One time Roma came out and said, "You boys are talking too much. You need to finish up the job of getting rid of these weeds." And so we set it aside and finished our weed whacking. Yes, Mel was the absolute best neighbor you could possibly have. I hope that I have expressed completely how he was the best in everything he did. Thank you very much.
I was going on graduate school at Washington State, and I was living in a dorm, and the next room to me was a guy I got well acquainted with named Mel Lindbloom. And so we seemed to be shaving at the same time, and we became good friends. He was working on his doctor's degree, and I was working on my master's degree. He was my hero. I think of all the people that I've known that really helped me, it's Mel. I watched him as a president, and I found myself doing things like he. If I had to list one or two people in my life that's my hero, Mel Lindbloom. So I took a lot of his ideas. I think his ideas of working with staff, being honest. I remember a couple times when we had some things that weren't so good happening, and we'd just soon not run off to the press, and he would say, "No, let's tell the press very first. Let's get the word out." But he was extremely honest, and I think his honesty tried to stay with me most of my life, or all of my life. If I had to say one thing, the influence Mel Lindbloom had on me is the greatest one I've had.
Hi, I'm Earl Hale. I worked at the state office most of the time when Mel was the president up here, and then afterwards we worked together on a few presidential searches and things like that. And I'd like they asked me to kind of represent the state board perspective, and I guess I'd like to broaden that to the systems perspective, because Mel had influence. Well, Rich talked about how he'd come down and lobby our office. What he was lobbying for was money. And but he had influence through all of the system, through the Trustees Association, through the President's Association, and I'm going to try to capture some of that because he was that kind of a major figure in the system. My experience began with Mel in 1971 when I joined the state board staff, and the system was brand new. Dan Evans mentioned that briefly, and it had become a state system of colleges for you non-community college junkies that are in the room. That was a little of the history and the context of what was going on back in the 70s. And it was a little bit different than what Dan described, because as it became a state agency, all these community colleges became part of a state system. And it triggered a fair amount of debate about roles. What's the state office's role versus what's the college's role? How decentralized should it be? How centralized should it be? And we've had, the conversations weren't always cool when we had those conversations about get on your back on your side of the line. But the point I would like to make is that Mel had a foot in each bucket. He could look at issues strategically, he could look at the long term, and he could give advice to our office or to the board I worked for in those days about the division of labor between campuses and the state office. And he could talk a little bit about what this would mean, what needs to be systematized, what doesn't. And I really appreciated that about Mel because he could look at the big picture and he could be a statesman. I think Rich used that term, and I would agree with that. He was also, as our office and our board and the other presidents and trustees in the systems would call him for advice. And I don't know, his assistant isn't here today, but he got a lot of phone calls from, well, what do you think of this? Or what's that damn state board doing now? Or whatever. And he was very good at providing both sides of an argument and then laying out exactly what his preference was. And he could speak pretty directly. When you got all through with a phone call with Mel, you knew where he stood. And he was a great guy, but he was an opinion leader. And so the thing I would like to mention that going as the system was developing in the 70s and becoming a state system, and as the roles were being determined and what's state and what's local and all of that, Mel was an opinion leader on those conversations, and he kind of helped steer the conversations to a more strategic level. And I will never forget that was clearly one of his strengths. And he was such an opinion leader that people listened to him. And so, you know, some of us in the state office could say something and he could say it and they'd listen to him. They wouldn't necessarily listen to us. So anyway, the opinion leader, the advice giver to the system was a role that Mel played very well, as Rich said, the best. When I'll speak for myself, when I needed help on an issue, and I'll have a couple of stories to tell you here, I would call Mel Lindbloom because he would give it to me straight, and I like that. I could spend the rest of the time that the staff has given me here telling you stories about Mel on issues and stuff and how he would step in and referee and so forth. But I got other things I want to say, and so I'll stop at that. The second point I want to talk about Mel, though, is the issue of leadership. There's another attribute that I guess is implied in some of the things that Ray and Rich said there that I guess I would just come right out and say, and that is that he put the issue of leadership right on the table. He espoused it in his personal characteristics, and later on, after he retired here, and even when he was here, he was very interested in mentoring people, bringing the next generation up to become leaders of this college system that was forming in that era. And I suspect the current president can suggest that maybe some of those state-local debates are still going on. Anyway, but I'd like to first talk about Mel as a person, as a leader that he was, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about his view to mentoring the next generation, which is, I think, one of the characteristics of a strong leader. And the first one is that he was transparent. He didn't obscure issues. He was thoughtful, and that's probably for me a major issue because he thought through things. You'd ask him a question about something, and he'd give you an answer that he'd thought about, and it wasn't just winging it off the top of my head. Now, what's best for Green River? The college people don't have to hear this. He would give me a straight answer about something that was very thoughtfully put together. He was a good communicator. All of you that knew Mel knew that when he said something, you could understand him. He didn't get lost in the jargon of the day. as I sometimes do. And the last point I would make is that he was decisive. He could make a decision, and it was a thoughtful decision, and it would be communicated well, but he could make a decision. And I think those are attributes of leadership that stood him in great stead. On the second half of my leadership point here is the belief in building the next generation of leaders to lead this college system. And we have one of those that's sitting right down here at the front table. He was a good mentor. And I know, because I was one of those people he mentored. I was just a young buck when I started this system back in '71, and he was only 10 years from retirement or thereabouts. And he was very good at mentoring. After he retired, he did presidential searches in the state, as helping other boards of trustees find new presidents as the leadership turned over, and he was very good at that. And he had a lot of contacts and so forth, but his whole approach, as I said earlier, to the future, he took the long view, and he had a very high priority placed on good leadership makes good organizations, and vice versa. Unfortunately, we had a few of those too. But he felt really strongly about that, and when I would call him and ask him about somebody, or say, can you check this person out, or somebody down in Oregon that I didn't know, or somebody like that, he would do it, and he would do a good job, and he would figure it out. And one of the things that, a quick story of Mel is that often when he would get through with a search, he would give me a call in the office and give me a rundown of how the search had gone. And it had gone well, or it hadn't gone well, or we couldn't really check this person out, or so forth. And he would usually conclude, as I said, he could make a decision, he could say something. He would conclude, anyway, we got you a good candidate here, this is going to be a good president, it's going to be okay, or this is the best we could do. It was kind of a small field out there. Good luck. And I remember one of those conversations, and it was as I said earlier, you could always understand what Mel was telling you. Anyway, I have just two more. Can I have another 2 minutes? 1 minute? The fact that Mel placed such a value on leadership, and the fact that he personified it himself, and he helped get leaders to come to the colleges, was one of the things that strengthened this system as it developed in the 70s and 80s, from a bunch of K-12 institutions to a bunch of community colleges. The other thing that I would make a reference to Mel and Roma is that they were nice people. He had all those characteristics that I've just described in spades, but he was a nice guy. And he was a good friend of me, friend of my wife, Camille, who's sitting right down here. And I'm going to tell two quick stories about him being a nice guy. The first one is when I first started the state board in 1971, I had some assignment, I don't even know what it was, and my boss told me, why don't you go call Mel Lindbloom and see what he thinks, and listen to his advice. And I did that, but I got all mixed up because the president of Bellevue at that time was a guy by the name of Earl Landerholm. And Landerholm and Lindbloom got all screwed up in my brain. And you can imagine what happened. I called Earl Landerholm, thought I was talking to Mel Lindbloom. And and Merle was great too. He says, I think you're talking to the wrong guy. You want to be talking to Mel Lindbloom. Here's his number, blah, blah, blah. And so then I called Mel, and I told him I'd done it. I said, I feel stupid, but I'm sorry I did it. And he was so good. I mean, he kidded me a little bit, but it was fine. And I've never forgotten that story because it just exemplified how he would deal with people, even young bucks at the state staff that didn't know what the hell they were doing. And the second thing is, more recently, Mel and Roma had Camille and I up for lunch at their home here in Auburn when they had kind of get more acquainted. I guess that was after I became the state director or something, I don't know. And he wanted to expose Roma to the lowlifes that he had to hang out with. But anyway, we came up and had lunch with them that day, and they were very welcoming, and we went down and walked around Auburn and got to know the town a little bit and so forth. But that was an example of how he was a nice guy, and he made new people on the block feel welcome, feel part of the family. And it's the background within which he operated as the best, as Rich said, and I just want to make sure that everybody realized that. Of course, everybody that knows him knew that was the case. But with that, I will close, and I appreciate the time. And as you might suspect, I consider Mel Lindbloom one of my best friends. So, anyway, thank you.
I was going down the 320th, the windy part of the street, and I came around one of the corners and I saw this car airborne going down over the bank and down into the trees, and there was no one else around. So I pulled off and climbed down over the bank and through the brush, and here was this girl. All I could see were her legs hanging out the front window. But I'm down there and I couldn't get her out of the car, so I climbed back up the hill. And about that time, some students were coming by. I think there were 4 boys. And so they came down and we all got her out of the car, and someone called an ambulance. And it so happened that the Auburn newspaper guy, Kaufman was his name, came by and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're trying to rescue this person who went over the bank." And in a big headline in the paper the next day, college president rescues student. And my friend from Tacoma, president of Tacoma, Tom Ford, called me and said, "Mel, you'll do anything for an FDE."
Hello, my name is Rawhide Papritz, and I taught geography here at the college for 40 years. Amongst my friends and some of my students and associates, I'm known as a storyteller. But after following Earl, I'm not so sure. I'll start off with a minor story. I met a neighbor lady this morning at the end of my driveway. And we've had some good talks, and we share each other's problems, concerns. And I said, well, I get to go up to the campus and give a talk to a bunch of people that know more than I do about the former President Mel Lindbloom. She says, oh, well, good luck. I said, well, how are you feeling? I said, I feel a little bit like when I was a park ranger over in the Grand Teton National Park, and the chief ranger gave me a call and said, there is a bison jam up on the highway. Rawhide, get up there and take care of that. And I looked at my associate fire control aide that was with me. We drove up there, and he says, Jim, he says, Rawhide, what are you going to do? And I says, I don't know, I'll play it by ear. And we could barely get to the jam. There were so many cars parked on both sides of the highway. So we pulled over and went through a fence, and there was about a herd of about 14, 15 bison. And this fire control aide kept saying, Rawhide, what are you going to do? I said, I haven't worked that out yet. But I had my Smokey Bear hat on, and I figured that the bison would, accommodate me. Walked over and began to talk to the head bison. And I was using my hand signals because there were hundreds of people out on the road wanted to see a federal employee do his job. And so, you got to move. You got to move. And he just, like this. And I took my gloves out, whacked him on his behind, turned around. And finally, at the third whack, he got up. And I said, uh-oh, uh-oh. He got up, and they get up with their back end first, and then their front end. And then he's still standing there. I said, now you got to go out that way, across the highway. So a lot of gestures. So I gave him a whack. And the point of the story really is terrible. I usually don't tell stories this way. Was when she asked me, how do you think it's going to go? I said, well, it could go one of two ways, like with my herding the bison on foot. It could either go disastrously or it could go well. The bison thing went well. Let's try the talk. I was hired in 1968, and that's what the center of the campus looked like at the time. And the hiring was, I wasn't sure it was even going to happen, because my understanding, the State Board for Community Colleges had told the presidents they needed to go out across the United States and bring in fresh blood, fresh perspectives, not all redone people from, Pullman or from University of Washington or Western or whatever. And so I applied, and I got the word that I could meet Ray Needham, who was a dean of instruction for Green River, and he would be in Oklahoma City on a certain date. And could I be there? And I said, yeah, I can be there. So I met Ray at the airport, and we had a nice talk. And 30 minutes or so just went by really fast. He said, oh my God, I'm late for another appointment. So he walked away, and he had already told me that, and I already knew that he was out searching up fresh people from different parts of the country. And as he walked away, he said, oh, by the way, where are you from? And I said, Mukilteo, Washington. Oh, no. Well, I like what I see. We'll have you come to Green River. I think I'm amazed how the college physically stayed wooded for so long. That was part of the vision that Hayes Holman and Mel had. And for the first 20 years or so, that's kind of the way it was. At a point, the vegetation was actually growing over the sidewalks. He made tunnels. And but he had a stick-to-itiveness to stay with the vision. The other, I don't know if he enunciated it, but they had the vision of keeping the buildings single story. So you don't minimize the humans that are on the ground, okay, with the big high rises. Oh, we have high rises now, but that's another story. During that early time period, Mel was, I think, proud of the plaza that we had right in the center of the campus. And it was a fountain, and there were 4 white columns that someday may come back. Right? Yeah, I'm used to lobbying. A lot of you don't realize, see, it is a weird situation to be in, to try to go back 50 years and talk about the effect that a college president had on your life. And I'm trying. I found it to be really surprising. At the time I was hired, there were 178 faculty. That particular year, 20 were hired. I came in with 20 other people, 19 other people. And found out right away that the president of the college would interview you after a year, at the end of the year, and find out how things went and how he could make things better for you. I said, a president does that? And he did. I think for about 3 or 4 years, and then finally the numbers just got too much for him to do that with everyone. But that was kind of neat to be able to do that with your president. Mel was well thought of because, as many of you have mentioned, he was a very personable individual. And so when he would call an all-faculty meeting, the president was going to speak, I think like 99% of the faculty showed up. Really. Because they expected him to have something important to say. The college developed such a reputation for programs, exceptional programs, that when I would go off to other colleges, they would ask me what college I was from. I'd say Green River. He said, "Oh, Green River, what a great college." Seemed like everyone had heard of Green River in some fashion. He said, "Oh, that's that great nursing program you have down there. That's that great forestry program. That's that great air traffic control program." On and on and on. And so when I went to these meetings, proud to say that I was from Green River, because I expected that sort of response. And Mel was, as a leader of the college, was, I'm sure, greatly responsible for that. Mel was very sociable, as it's been mentioned before, but probably most of you didn't get the treatment that I got from Mel. I don't know what it was. Maybe the name. He just felt he had to do something special with a guy named Rawhide. I wouldn't have seen him for weeks or maybe months. I mean, at a college campus like this, you don't see the president there all the time. So it could have been months. And he'd see me, he'd come up, and he would do this. I knew it was coming. His hand goes high like this and dives down to my hand and shakes, "How the hell are you, Rawhide?" I think he had seen too many gun smokes. But when I was asked if I could talk about the early days, because I was one of the early hires, I said, sure. And I said, I think I have a perspective that most mature faculty would not have. And that is, I don't know how it started, but I was invited to play basketball Tuesday mornings at 6:45 in the gymnasium. And there was typically 4-on-4, so it was almost a full range of basketball. But it was some people refer to it as guerrilla basketball. I just refer to it as combat basketball. And Mel was tough to get by. I'd drive toward the basket, and he was quick enough to get in my way. Sometimes he knocked me down, and he always came over right away and said, "Are you okay?" and would help me get up. That's the kind of guy he was. Knock you down and help you get back up. Now, that wasn't true with his other administrators. Bill Taylor, if you got by him, he would grab your jersey and pull you down, and Earl Norman would just give you the hip and try to knock you off. They were dangerous. So I became an outside shooter. The last really good time I had with Mel was when he was in the Edmonds area at a condo there, and I asked him if he'd like to get together for lunch, and he said, "Oh, absolutely." So we went down on the waterfront on a beautiful sunny spring day, pleasant as could be, very much like today, and sat for 2 hours reminiscing and chatting about the good old days. His wife, or my wife, and he had a friend along with him. And it just, when I picture Mel, that's what I picture. Smile on his face and happy as could be, and that's how we left each other. So. Great man, a good associate, and an outstanding president.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve MacGeorge. Had the good fortune to have Mel as my father-in-law. Rawhide brings up the handshake remembrance, and if there was one thing that you learned really quickly, it was how to get and give a very good handshake, because he made a very special point of showing you how, and you remember it. So, going through Mel's numerous notebooks and papers that you'll hear about later, my wife Lisa found a poem written by Gil Ziegler, who was the student body president here at Green River back in the 70-71 school year. And I think he touches on some of what made Mel so special. An exceptional college president, a great father, and an amazing father-in-law. The poem is titled "An Occasion for the Occasional Man." Oftentimes people happen to think of ideas, of concepts. Sometimes people think of other people and point out how ideas and concepts can be applied to better the lives of their fellow men. Occasionally, a person comes along who thinks of ideas and concepts, who points out how they can be applied to better the lot of others, and who accomplishes the ends of what started out as thought, of what later evolved into dreams. Seldom is honor given to occasional people. Their dreams become the everyday realities of those around them, and their labor for the fulfillment of those dreams is forgotten. Today we pause, we stop to honor the selfless labors of Mel Lindbloom, and we attempt to honor this occasional man. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So it might seem a little odd to have me here today. My name's Chelsea. I graduated from Green River in 2007, and unlike a lot of you, I only met Mel once, and I was born 6 years after he had already retired. So it's a little strange, but I'm here to speak about his legacy because I'm an influence of that. So again, like I said, we met only once in February of 2016. I actually think it was on my birthday that we met at the ribbon cutting for this building that we're all hanging out in. And we met, and it was really, really wonderful. He said that he was so proud of all of the things that the student union or the student leadership was able to accomplish that year, which I paused and said, "What year? Do you mean 2016? Or do you mean in 2007, which is when I first encountered the story of Mel Lindbloom?" I helped initiate a project that was entirely inspired by him, and it was really to honor him and his vision of making Green River a truly student-centered institution. Back in 2007, Rutkowski, saw him in the video, told me that when the first student union building was being constructed in the early 70s, it was really a true labor of love for Mel, because he had wanted a place for students to host events and meet new people and relax and have fun, because he saw the holistic view of education. It was more than just what was being presented in classrooms. and what was being written in term papers, which I'm really glad I don't have to do anymore. He wasn't an administrator first, he was an educator first, who genuinely loved students and wanted their institution to foster their growth as whole people, which I greatly appreciate. And back in January of 2007, when Rich was telling me this, it deeply resonated with me then and still does now. So up until then, I had spent the majority of the previous year in the old SU building. I was going to concerts, I was listening to guest speakers, I was grabbing lunch at the Gator Grill, and eventually working in student leadership, which are all things I genuinely think that Mel would appreciate as being a part of my Green River education, because I learned way more doing those things than I did in the classroom. And he saw that vision. You laugh, it's true. I say that because I worked with Rich Rutkowski to get this building to be a reality because of the legacy of Mel, because of what Mel believed in. So while I was in student leadership, I'm sure Danny can remember this. I always was saying, why is it so dark in here? There's too many people in this building. And I just realized we were quickly outgrowing this building that Mel had put his heart and soul into. And purely inspired by Mel's influence and collaborating with Rich, who had also seen a need for a new student union building, we were able to get student financial support to get this building built so we can be here now, which is amazing. So when I did finally meet Mel in February 2016, it was a bit like meeting your favorite singer-songwriter. Mine's Jim Croce, if anyone's interested, overall. But the artist whose lyrics kind of get you through a particular period of your time, whether it's good or bad or stressful or whatever it is. And for me, that was Mel, because in early 2007, I was so entrenched in getting this campaign to have students really support Mel's legacy in this building. And it always came back to wanting to have students be whole people. Okay, sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze too, and the bright lights are not helping. I'm so sorry. So that was always forefront in my mind as I worked to get this campaign approved. And Mel's influence, I didn't really realize this until I was reflecting on it, but I entered human resources and entrepreneurship, and I'm always trying to focus on my employees being whole people. I don't want you to come to work, I'm gonna sneeze. I don't want you to come to work and put everything aside. You can't do that, we don't do that. And when Rich was explaining to me the vision that Mel had for Green River's campus, it was whole person centered. I take that with me in my career now. Basically, I just want to say, even though I've never met you, Mel, you are missed, and your legacy lives on in your near and dear, in me, and in every student who uses any iteration of this building that has your name or walks on this campus. Thanks.
My name is Mark Stansfield, and my father was James Stansfield, who I believe was probably Mel's best friend, because he certainly was my father's best friend. And so my communication and relationship with Mel was quite a bit different. I was a kid growing up, and you know, you always think of the adults and they're all the know-alls and everything else. But as I got older, I began to see Mel as a person as opposed to this kind of demigod. And I realized that he had the most incredible sense of humor of almost anyone I knew. Now think about it. Everyone here, at least a lot of you knew Mel. You couldn't be around him 5 minutes and you weren't laughing. And you get my father and him together, and it was just like a comedian night. You know, I mean, the guys are playing off each other all day and half the night. Let me give you an example. This building right here. My dad and Mel, and of course Roma and my mother were together. And Mel goes, well, they named the Union Building after me. There's Husky Union Building, hub. Kruger Union Building, cub. And then he'd look up and smile, lub. And just, he could laugh at himself. And not everybody has the ability to do that. And so everyone enjoyed being around Mel. But there was another side of him too that most people didn't see. I was at his house one time I think it was after retirement, but he had a display set up of his time in the Navy. And I don't know if you guys knew that, but he was in the Navy right out of high school for 3 years on a destroyer in the Pacific. And I started asking him questions. I didn't know much about it, and it was kind of interesting to me. And he mentioned once I would ask him all the insignias and where they were and all the battles, and it was quite entertaining. And then he said something which kind of got my attention. He said they had a half a dozen black stewards, on board. They would handle the kitchen. And the ship was commissioned, the destroyer, in New Orleans, and most of the crew were from the South. Now, how he got on there, I don't know, but he did. And some of the crew did not treat the black guys very nicely and were giving him lip. And Mel, I don't know if you guys knew this, but he was quite a jock. He would be considered a major big man on campus in today's world, quarterback on the football team in high school and college and all those other things. But he also had another talent unknown to most people was he could box. And in his weight class, he was the fleet champion. And whenever you had a disagreement, in those days, they would set up a boxing match. And that's how they decided to work out their differences with his black stewards. Less than one round. And that was the end of that. From that point on, all those Southern guys did not give any lip to the black stewards. So that was a side of Mel that most of you never saw and never really knew about. Now, this fishing rod, what is it doing up here? Well, this is Mel's fishing rod. My father kept it at his home, specifically for Mel. And they would have, as they got older, opening day fishing. Mel and Roma, my father, mother, and 2 other couples would get together for a weekend. And it later evolved into kind of Lindbloom weekend. And they would start it out by, going on little trips around the area. My father would show them things. My father was in Quincy, by the way. If you guys have never been to Quincy, my father loved it, but it wasn't the most beautiful little town in the world, but that's the way things are. And so he was quite proud of it and would show things off. And on Saturday night, they would go to dance club at the Moose. They would dance till 2 in the morning. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this either, but Lisa is. Mel was the best dancer I have ever seen. The rumba, the cha-cha, Earl, the foxtrot, you knew it, he had them down. And my father, who is a pretty good dancer, on more than one occasion would say, Mel's a really good dancer. And he was right. He was right. At this very room right here, he danced with Lisa at her reception. And I don't think Lisa ever stopped smiling. And she should have, because he could, if you could follow, he was there. And so that's what they would do. So they would dance till 2 in the morning, and then the Moose would feed them breakfast. Now, I noticed as the years evolved, when they got home, the party continued. There was a little alcohol involved, of course, but we won't go down to that too much farther. But anyway, they would party until 5 in the morning when it was time to get up and go fishing. And if my brother and I were around, we would tag along with them and go there. As I got older, they decided to kind of hit the sack for a few hours before the fishing, but they would still do that kind of thing. And when they go fishing, oh my gosh, bragging rights for first fish, biggest fish, who caught the limit first. And it was like, fish on, I got one, mine's bigger than yours. It just went on like that ad nauseum. And when we got back, we would limit out. And in those days, 4 adults and 2 kids, 64 fish guys. So there was a lot of cleaning of fish. And one time my father got lucky. The green rod did not make it at that time. And my dad got lucky and caught the biggest fish. So he's holding it up for the camera. He's very proud of himself. Think of a major league or junior high hitter that hit the grand slam home run in the bottom of the ninth and won the game. That was my dad right there. Behind him, Mel is holding this little tiny fish. They probably had to kill it to keep it, or so it already died, holding it and laughing himself silly. And that's the way Mel was. He would find the humor in every situation. And before I go, Lisa, I've already probably talked too much. In this fishing license, which is right here from your dear old dad, there's a middle initial. His middle name starts with R. What on earth is that? Roger. There you go. All right. Lisa, I give this poll to you, and thank you guys for putting up with me up here. Thank you.
This is a fitting tribute to, at this time of the year, Memorial Day, and to raise the flag. I think of this time of the year and to give tribute to veterans who have served, and to remember those who never made it back, and to those who are still suffering the trauma of combat. And I see these two young Marines, and I think back, I was in World War II and saw them at Saipan and Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and they were tremendous. So this is a very fitting time, and I'm very happy to be included in this ceremony. And again, tribute to our veterans. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I remember that day. I brought my dad here. He was 91, and I thought he did a nice job, and he was so happy to be here. Thanks, everybody, for coming or Zooming in. A special thank you to Dr. Johnson for that wonderful welcome, and all the speakers for your participation in making this just a wonderful celebration of my dad's life. I have so much gratitude, and I cannot say enough words to Tanya and Megan, who had the vision and the talent and to execute this truly special event. So thank you very much. I definitely couldn't have done this myself. I also wanted to say a really big thank you to my family and my friends for their love and support the last few years of my dad's life, and I'm forever grateful. The Green River community is a really special group of people, and my dad was grateful and proud to be part of such a wonderful place. As many of you know, he was most passionate about creating an environment where people from all backgrounds and prior experiences could get an education and then use that education to better their own lives. After my dad and two administrators, Dick Barkley and Mike McIntyre, coined the phrase, "Think students, then decide," it became a decision-making mantra for Green River. Students always came first. I want to mention two post-Green River professional activities that my dad participated in that were outside of education that he was extremely proud of. The first one was he was on the Board of Trustees for Harborview Medical Center for 10 years. And he found that to be very interesting and rewarding. And much like Green River, that's a special group of people that are putting their talents toward helping and providing specialized health care to people of all backgrounds and experiences. The second thing he participated in that was outside of education was he helped to develop the University of Washington neighborhood clinics. And again, he held that group of people and their mission in the highest regard. My dad's professional life was very public. He garnered respect in good times and in situations when tough decisions were not popular, and I'm sure there were many. He was honest and fair and sincerely cared about people. As my Auntie Sue recently wrote in a letter to me, when you were talking to Mel, you had his undivided attention. He would look at you as if you're the only person in the room, and I think he really did that. My dad was destined to become an administrator, not just for his leadership and vision, but his organizational skills were exceptional. He had a file or a notebook for everything, and I mean everything. His record keeping was truly remarkable. Whenever he and my mom would travel, he would put together a very detailed travel itinerary notebook, and my sister and I would be summoned to come and review it in case of emergency. If we happened to be unavailable for the review, it would be mailed. He was also quite good at photo albums, and my mom was somewhat critical of his photography skills, but once the picture was taken, it would shortly thereafter be in an album. And sadly, his love of high-level, time-consuming organization did not pass down to Anne or myself. For my sister Anne and me, he was the best dad ever. We knew every day we were his highest priority. He was also a very supportive husband. Even with a demanding job, my dad supported my mom in the many, many things she loved to do. My parents were both originally teachers and very academically minded. There was a very large emphasis on learning in our home. I used to often lament, do we always have to learn something? They would both laugh, but invariably, yes, there was a lesson involved. My sister was so much more receptive and patient with all the learning. As I was going through my dad's things, a lot of his things, I ran across a box of all of his old speeches that he wrote for various situations, graduations, outside groups and clubs, other colleges, etc. And my dad got up at 5:30 every day, and usually he worked on speeches in the early morning. And when I was in elementary school, he probably wasn't too happy about this, but I also got up very early. And so while I ate my breakfast, he would read his speeches out loud. And even though the content to me was very boring at the time, it was a special time with my dad and I remember it very fondly. My mom and dad, as has been mentioned already today, had great senses of humor and were very social. My dad was very fun. They both absolutely loved kids. They knew all of our friends, and they knew all of my kids' friends, and this continued throughout their entire lives. If you ever met my parents, you were remembered. My dad was the main driver, maybe the only driver, of my friends and me on the weekends when I was fairly young, maybe 7 or so. And this is when I first realized how exceptionally smart my dad was. I just could not believe that he knew and remembered where every single friend lived. When I was 7 and my sister was 10, my dad bought a ski boat. We water skied all summer, all over the place. Lake Chelan, Camino Island, the Columbia River at the home of our dear friends, the Stansfields, Idols and Peckinpah's beach places, Heron Island, and of course, Lake Tapps with the Haggertys. My dad was very patient, would spend all afternoon taking all sorts of kids water skiing. He missed out on so much adult conversation, but he was always willing to do it. While my mom and dad had very distinct personalities and interests and hobbies, they had great solidarity on the things that were the foundation of our family. Work hard, that was big. Be humble. Contribute in some way. Think of others and be interested in people. And be a lifelong learner. My dad very often said that he was so grateful that his sons-in-law were such good, kind people, and he loved them as if they were his own sons. My parents were thrilled to have 3 wonderful grandchildren, and they participated in their lives in an extremely significant way. I'd like to end with a poem that I found taped to the inside of my mom's address book. And I would like to dedicate this to my sister Anne, my mom, and my dad. This day is remembered and quietly kept. No words are needed. We shall never forget. For those who love don't go away. They walk beside us every day. Unseen and unheard, but always near. So loved, so missed, so very dear. Now I would like to introduce my 3 wonderful children, and they're going to just share a couple of fun stories and experiences with Grandpa.
I'm Andrew MacGeorge. I'm one of Mel's grandsons. So one of the things that I admired most about my grandfather is he always wanted to help people that were less fortunate or didn't have opportunities that a lot of other people didn't have. He did this not by giving things to people, but by lending counseling, education, support, and the opportunity to succeed. Growing up with a role model like my grandfather, it seemed impossible to be as accomplished as he was. However, he never expected any of us to be as accomplished as he was. He said, choose what you want to do and be the best at that. No matter what I wanted to do at the time, whether it be a dentist, a firefighter, stockbroker, etc. It changed quite a bit growing up. He was always there and always fully supported my ambitions. Eventually, when I graduated the police academy, even in his older age, which made traveling a little bit more difficult for him, he told me on the phone he wouldn't miss it for the world. And sure enough, he flew down to Colorado and was there with my mother for my graduation. From then on, he asked for a picture of me in uniform for his mantle every year, and sure enough, I did send him those. Through all my accomplishments and failures, my grandfather was there to either cheer me on or help me through a rough time. He was a true family man, public servant, and most of all, the best grandfather anyone could have asked for. And I am truly, truly blessed to have grown up as his grandson. Thank you.
I'm a little shorter than he is. Well, first off, I know that my dad and Rawhide have talked about his handshake, and I do also want to say that I am so thankful that my grandpa taught me a good handshake, because it's one of the most important things I've learned, and especially as a woman, it's the best thing to have. So thank you, Grandpa. But one thing you guys might not know about my grandpa is he was an absolute shark around the cribbage table. I'd like to think all the years of us playing every Thanksgiving and Christmas, his pegging ways and 29-point hands have rubbed off on me. But I think the biggest takeaway from these games was that I learned to be humble. All I wanted to do was skunk my brothers, parents, and Uncle Rich and celebrate with joy, but he taught me the art of a poker face, and win or lose, you have to have humility and grace. Growing up with 2 older brothers, we all loved to wrestle and roughhouse, much to our parents' dismay. But let me tell you, Grandpa loved it. Being a high school wrestling coach in his earlier days, he taught us all the art of the half Nelson, full Nelson, and his personal favorite, the chicken wing. This move, he would whisk your arm right out from under your nose, pin it behind your back in one fell swoop. Being the competitive gal I was, I would walk into Grandpa's house, fingers locked in front of me for dear life so he couldn't get me. I think that Grandpa and Grandma may have been working together, though, because it only took the offer of ice cream for me to forget about the chicken wing, and boom, he got me every time. The boys and I used to love playing office with all of Grandpa's old office supplies he had sitting around. In theory, we would set up desks in the basement and all got to pick out our favorite supplies and outfit our cubicles with Grandpa's fancy stuff. How it usually ended up was in a big fight over who got the Dr. Melvin Lindbloom desk placard, because that would mean you were the boss. Well, not until Grandpa came to the rescue. Well, as you can imagine, no one wanted their puny little sister to be the big boss. So when Grandpa came to the rescue, he would always make sure that we all had a fair chance of being the big boss, and would always end our yelling matches by whipping out a sweet pair of gold pens or a notepad to distract us. We were so lucky to have such a wonderful Grandpa and Grandma to love us, guide us, and support us to flourish into the people we are today. I couldn't be more thankful for all the ham sandwiches, butter rolls, and most of all, it's not called napping, it's called resting your eyes.
My name is Chris MacGeorge. Look like the other guy, Andrew, over there. I could talk for hours on lessons that I've learned and growing up with my grandfather. But I'm going to try and keep it light here and just talk briefly about a few subjects that I think, hopefully a lot of people can relate to, especially the first one. This first one might actually, you'll probably wish, Earl, that you would have known this when he was your second phone call and he was giving you crap over the phone. So number one, tomatoes. Mel didn't like tomatoes, or at least didn't like sliced tomatoes. Growing up, as I'm sure everybody can relate when you're a young kid, you kind of follow the example and you do what the adults do. When I saw Mel Lindbloom, college president, Harborview Medical Center board member, World War II Navy veteran, take a sliced tomato off of a burger, right then and there I knew it was okay. To this day, I'm sure Lisa, my mom, still loses sleep over the fact that her grown son still takes tomatoes off of literally everything, including last night with our salad that we had. So, when I was about 4 or 5, whenever it is you learn how to ride a bike, I was very stubbornly refusing to learn how to ride a bike without the training wheels. So my grandpa took, being the teacher that he is, took us all to the local park, all of us kids to the local park to play, and patiently insisted on me learning how to ride a bike without the training wheels, and honestly, he kind of said, "We are not leaving here until I'm proficient in doing so." That evening, I learned how to ride a bike like a big boy. So spent a lot of time together when we were young. When we were with my grandparents, we felt like we were the most important things in the world. Nothing else mattered to them. 100% of their attention was on us. This may have been because there were two of me and then my younger sister, who honestly I don't think really took the humility lesson during cribbage. I mean, if we're just putting it all on the table right now, got to put it out there. So there was all of us. So there's probably no other choice but to just pay attention to the three wild kids. However, I'm pretty sure it's because we were all they cared about at that moment in time. And from what I've been told, this is what he made everyone feel like when they were in his presence. And I think it was sincere. He truly cared about people. This is one of the lessons that he taught me indirectly throughout my life, and that I have tried to bring into both my professional and personal relationships. When I was little, I loved my grandpa because he loved me so much, and as I matured, I started to understand and really see how revered he was with everyone that he crossed paths with. And hearing everybody speak today, I can really confirm that he was revered. I think that's, when I was writing this speech, I said that's a word that not a lot of people use very much anymore, and I think it really applies to Mel Lindbloom. And it was very inspiring to experience in person, and it was the perfect example to follow. Now I'd like to thank you all for being here, and then have Rich Allsworth, my uncle, come up for his remarks.
My name is Richard Allsworth, and I have to be totally honest, I have lived a charmed life. I had great parents. I grew up in the greatest place a kid could grow up. And then, to top it off, on December 21st, 1974, I married Mel and Roma's daughter, Anne. And at that moment, I looked at Mel and I said to myself, you have become my father-in-law, my mentor, and most of all, my friend. And over the next 40 or 45 years, I proudly would look at Mel and say, Mel, you are my father-in-law, you are my friend, and you are my mentor. And then on February 10th, 2020, Mel passed away. But he will always be my father-in-law, my friend, and my mentor. It is said that a person has two lives. Mel's first life ended on February 10th, 2020. But on the second life, a person lives until that last person that remembers him passes away. And because Mel has two grandsons, Andrew and Christopher, and a granddaughter, Elle, Mel's second life will be long and incredible. When you go home this evening, and sit down for dinner, pour yourself a glass of wine or a soda or a glass of water, raise it in the air and say, to life, L'chaim, to Mel Lindbloom, our friend, our mentor, and in my case, my father-in-law.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Backus, and I am proud to be a graduate of Green River Community College. I attended here 79 through 81, and always loved spending time in the Lindbloom Student Center for studying, for dancing at times, for socializing, and especially for gathering. That's exactly what Mel was all about. That whole student, that whole person, was about enjoying time with one another. I'm also the proud parent of a 2018 Green River College graduate. One of the things when I was attending Green River Community College, and it was a snow day, and as a teenager, you kind of hope that classes will be canceled for the day. There was rumor at the time, and Mel was the president at the college at the time, there was rumor that the college would only be closed if the president could not make it up the hill. Mel always made it up the hill. Always. It's like, you know, some of these roads around here, they're hilly. I don't know what kind of four-wheel drive vehicle he might have had, but he made me come to school on days that I was wanting to just stay in my pajamas and watch the snow outside. I also had the blessing of being on the Auburn Library Board with Mel. I was honored to be there with him because I was always in awe of him. It was in the early 2000s, and he told some great stories and had us laughing. I think we forgot the agenda most of the time. I should have asked him about if he was the one responsible for those snow days while I had the chance. I have the privilege today of reading a proclamation, a mayor's proclamation. It says, whereas Dr. Mel Lindbloom was the founding president of Green River Community College, having been hired by Superintendent Hayes Holman of the Auburn School District to start the college in 1964. And whereas President Lindbloom served for 15 years as president of the college, and during his time as president, Dr. Mel Lindbloom built the college from the ground up, carving the beautiful campus from the forest in an environmental manner. And whereas during his time as president, Dr. Mel Lindbloom used his skills to hire the most competent faculty and staff to serve the students in Auburn and surrounding communities. And whereas Dr. Lindbloom has been a tireless advocate for education and students during his entire life and during his entire career, Dr. Lindbloom had a guiding principle that was, think student, then decide. And whereas he worked to expand educational opportunities across Washington state by helping to build the statewide system of community colleges, and whereas to help the college and its students, Dr. Lindbloom founded the Green River Community College Foundation, which has grown in asset size to more than $30 million. And whereas since the college's inception, Dr. Lindbloom has helped more than 400,000 students achieve their educational goals and dreams. And whereas during his residence in Auburn, Dr. Lindbloom participated in the growth and development of the community by being a dedicated Rotary member for 50 years, and he further added to community benefit by serving on the Harborview Medical Center Board of Directors for 10 years. Now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim May 20th, 2022 as Mel Lindbloom Day in the City of Auburn, and encourage all residents to recognize and appreciate the contributions that founding President Mel Lindbloom has made to Auburn and the surrounding communities. Dated this 20th day of May, 2022.
I just want to say thank you again for coming today. This concludes the program for the celebration of life for Dr. Lindbloom. And please, all in-person guests, you are welcome to a reception just down the hall. So thank you again.